Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at something kind of surprising, I think.
Okay.
The relationship between bankruptcy and your utilities.
Interesting.
Yeah, it might seem kind of counterintuitive, but filing for bankruptcy can actually help you keep those essential services running, even if you're dealing with a lot of debt.
Huh.
We're going to be diving into a chapter from the complete book on bankruptcy by Peter Francis Juracy of Juracy Law to explore this.
Makes sense.
So I'm curious, it seems like people usually focus on like the debt elimination part of bankruptcy.
Right. Yeah.
But it sounds like there's this whole other side to it where it's about like protection and stability.
Absolutely. It's a fascinating aspect that often gets overlooked, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we tend to associate bankruptcy with losing things, but in this case, it could actually help you hold on to some pretty important stuff.
Exactly.
So let's dive into that a bit.
Okay, sounds good.
What happens when someone is facing a ton of debt and they get hit with a utility shutoff notice? Like, what can they do?
Yeah, that's a really tough situation to be in, no doubt. But the good news is that most states have laws in place that actually prevent utility companies from just cutting off your services.
Really, even if you owe them money.
Yep. Even if you have outstanding bills, once you filed for bankruptcy, they can't just disconnect you.
Wow. So that's a pretty significant protection.
For sure. It gives you a chance to breathe, time to sort things out financially without the added stress of losing those essential services.
That's huge, especially when you're already struggling.
Yeah,
It's like
definitely.
a lifeline.
I like that, a lifeline.
But, okay, so what about the debt itself? Like, let's say you owe a bunch of money to a utility company.
Yeah.
Does bankruptcy just wipe that slate clean?
Well, it's not exactly like erasing it. The term is discharge.
Okay.
But it basically means you're no longer legally obligated to pay that debt.
So, like, let's say I have a $600 past due electric bill, just to give a concrete example.
Sure.
So if I file for bankruptcy, that debt could be discharged, and then to get my electricity turned back on, I just need to pay like a reasonable deposit.
Yeah, that's the general idea. You get a fresh start with the utility company.
Wow. I can only imagine what a relief that would be.
It's a huge weight off your shoulders, for sure.
But okay, so we've been talking about electricity, but what about other services, like your phone or cable?
Right, good point. Those are essential these days, too.
Totally.
And thankfully, similar rules often apply.
So even though these companies might be able to suspend your service for unpaid bills, especially if you're in the middle of a bankruptcy,
Yeah.
just showing them proof of your filing can often get your service restored.
Exactly. And sometimes all it takes is bringing the account current.
So it sounds like bankruptcy isn't just about getting out of debt. It's also about maintaining access to these crucial services while you figure things out.
Absolutely. It's about using the legal system to protect yourself and create some stability during a time of crisis.
But it's important to remember that bankruptcy isn't some magic solution, right? It's not like it suddenly means you have more money to pay your bills.
No, definitely not.
Like the book points out, unpaid utility bills, that's often a symptom of a bigger problem.
Exactly. And that problem is usually insufficient income, not having enough money to cover your basic needs.
Bankruptcy might address the debt itself, but it doesn't fix the underlying issue.
Right. It's like if you can't pay your rent, bankruptcy isn't going to magically give you a raise.
Exactly. So it's more like a tool.
Yeah.
It buys you some time and some breathing room, but you still need a plan for the future.
I couldn't agree more.
And that's where Mrs. Wilson comes in, right?
Yeah, Mrs. Wilson is a fictional client that the book uses to illustrate this point.
So remind me what's going on with her situation.
So she's drowning in debt. Loans, credit cards, medical bills, you name it.
Oh, I see. The whole 9 yards.
And on top of that, she's facing utility disconnection.
Sounds like a lot of people, unfortunately.
It is, sadly.
So how does bankruptcy help her in this situation?
Well, by including her utility bills in her bankruptcy filing, she can essentially zero out those past due amounts.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So she can start fresh with the utility companies.
I bet that feels amazing just to get that immediate relief.
I'm sure it does.
But it sounds like there's some decisions to be made about which type of bankruptcy filing is right for her situation.
Oh, for sure. The book mentions Chapter 13 bankruptcy.
Right. So how could that help her?
Well, if she can manage to incorporate her past due mortgage payments into a repayment plan under Chapter 13, she might actually be able to save her home from going into foreclosure.
That would be incredible, but I imagine that depends on whether she can actually keep up with those payments, right?
Exactly. If that's not realistic for her, then Chapter 7 bankruptcy might be a better fit.
Okay, so how is Chapter 7 different?
Chapter 7 would allow her to eliminate her other debts and potentially sell her home to free up some equity.
So she'd be relieved of those mortgage payments that she can't afford.
Precisely. It's about finding the right strategy for each individual situation.
Right, because what works for one person might not work for another.
Exactly.
It sounds like the key takeaway from Mrs. Wilson's story is that bankruptcy can provide some much-needed relief in the short term,
Yeah.
but it also really highlights the importance of thinking about the long term.
Definitely, you need a plan for the future.
So bankruptcy can be a powerful tool to get those essential services back on track and maybe even save your home in some cases.
For sure.
But what happens after the bankruptcy is over? what does building a stable future actually look like?
That's the big question, isn't it? Bankruptcy can be a reset, but it's just the first step.
It's not just about getting out of debt, it's about staying out of debt.
You got it. And that means figuring out what caused the financial problems in the first place.
Oh, okay, so like is it a job issue? Or maybe they need to cut back on their spending.
Exactly. Or maybe they need help from a financial advisor to get back on track.
It's about taking control of your finances and making choices that will support you in the long run,
Right, so you can have a life where you're not constantly stressed about money.
where you can actually afford those essential things and maybe even have a little leftover for something fun every now and then.
Exactly. That's what real financial stability is all about.
So it's been really eye-opening to see how bankruptcy can actually help people keep their essential services running when they hit a rough patch.
Yeah, it's definitely a different way of looking at it.
And it's also been really helpful to talk about how important it is to think about the big picture and make a plan for the future.
Absolutely. It's about taking control and building a brighter future.
Well said. And before we wrap up this part of our conversation, we want to remind everyone that what we're talking about here is for informational purposes only.
Right. Definitely not legal advice.
If you're thinking about filing for bankruptcy, or if you have any questions about your specific situation, it's always best to talk to a qualified attorney.
For sure, they can give you personalized guidance and help you figure out the best course of action.
And hey, a lot of attorneys offer free consultations, so there's no harm in reaching out and just having a conversation.
Exactly. It's all about gathering information and making informed decisions.
Well, this has been a fascinating conversation, and I think we've learned a lot about how bankruptcy can be a surprising ally when it comes to protecting essential services and building a more stable financial future.
I agree. It's been a really insightful discussion.
Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Always happy to talk about this stuff. It's empowering, to realize that even when you're facing a mountain of debt, you still have options.
Right, exactly. It's about taking control and advocating for yourself
Absolutely.
instead of feeling helpless.
It's like, okay, I can actually do something about this. I can take that first step towards getting back on track.
And sometimes that first step might involve seeking out professional guidance.
For sure.
Speaking of which, the author of this book, Peter Francis Juracy, he's a bankruptcy attorney, right?
Yeah, he is, and he's been doing this for a long time, over 40 years.
Wow, he must have seen it all.
He probably has, and, he founded Juracy Law with the goal of making legal help more accessible for everyone.
Oh, that's great. It sounds like he's really passionate about helping people navigate this stuff.
Absolutely, and that comes through in his writing. He breaks down complex topics in a way that's easy to understand.
Which is so important because this can be a really intimidating subject.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, there's a lot of people out there who are struggling financially, but they might not even know that bankruptcy is an option,
Yeah, there's definitely a stigma around it.
like a sense of shame or failure.
Exactly. But it's important to remember that bankruptcy is a legal process, and it's designed to help people get back on their feet.
It's not the end, it's a new beginning.
Right. Everyone goes through tough times, and there's no shame in asking for help when you need it.
I love that. So for someone listening who's thinking, okay, this sounds like it might apply to me, like where do they even start?
Well, I'd say the first step is to educate yourself about the process.
Makes sense.
This book's a great place to start. It covers all the basics, the different types of bankruptcy, who's eligible, all that good stuff.
And of course, there's no substitute for personalized legal advice.
Right. Definitely talk to a qualified bankruptcy attorney who can assess your specific situation.
Someone who can guide you through the process and help you figure out the best course of action.
Exactly. And a lot of attorneys, including the folks at Juracy Law, they offer free consultations.
So there's really no risk in just reaching out and having a conversation.
Not at all. Knowledge is power, right? The more you know about your options, the better equipped you'll be to make decisions that are right for you.
I totally agree. It's about taking control of your financial future.
Exactly.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We've talked about how bankruptcy can actually help you keep your essential services running.
Yeah, it's not what most people think of when they hear the word bankruptcy.
And we've also highlighted how important it is to think about the long term and make a plan for a more stable financial future.
Absolutely. It's not just about getting out of debt. It's about staying out of debt.
And just a reminder to everyone, the information we've shared today is for informational purposes only.
Right, not legal advice.
Always consult with a qualified attorney if you have questions about your specific situation.
For sure, they can give you the personalized guidance you need.
All right, thanks for joining us on this exploration of bankruptcy and essential services.
It's been a pleasure, as always. It's really inspiring when you hear about people using bankruptcy to turn their lives around.
Yeah, it's like a fresh start.
Exactly. It can be a real catalyst for positive change, and not just financially, but emotionally, too.
Oh, yeah, totally. We've been talking about the numbers, but it's about so much more than that, right?
Absolutely. It's about reducing stress, gaining back a sense of control, and building a more secure future for yourself.
That's what it's all about. I mean, ultimately, it's about reclaiming your financial well-being and creating a life where you can actually thrive.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And it seems like a big part of that is having the right resources and support.
Oh, 100%. That's why I think books like this one are so valuable, you
A
know.
complete book on bankruptcy.
Yeah, it provides people with the information they need to understand their options and make informed decisions.
Like a roadmap for navigating this whole process.
Exactly. And, even though Peter Francis Jersey is a lawyer, he really wrote this book with the average person in mind.
Oh, that's great.
He wants to make bankruptcy less scary, demystify it a bit.
Makes sense because knowledge is power, right?
For sure. The more you understand about your options, the better decisions you can make.
Exactly. It's about taking control of your own financial story.
I like that. Taking control.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
We talked about those surprising ways that bankruptcy can help you keep your essential services running.
Yeah, who knew, right?
And we also dove into how important it is to think about the long term and develop a solid financial plan for the future.
It's all connected.
Exactly. It's been a really enlightening conversation.
It has.
And I hope our listeners are walking away feeling empowered by what we've talked about today, hopeful about their own financial futures.
Me too. Remember, everyone, you deserve financial peace of mind, and it's achievable.
Such a great point. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the often misunderstood world of bankruptcy.
It's been a pleasure as always.
And to our listeners, we hope you found this insightful. We'll see you next time.
See you later.
And just a reminder, the information shared in this show is for general knowledge and informational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. Attorney advertising. Past results do not guarantee similar outcomes. Listening to this show does not create an attorney-client relationship with Juris C Law or any of its attorneys. The information discussed is general in nature and may not apply to your specific legal situation. For personalized advice regarding your financial circumstances or potential bankruptcy options, we encourage you to consult directly with a qualified attorney. Juris EC Law offers free consultations to help you make informed decisions. Contact them today to learn more.